Imagine if every time you tried to learn something new, all you would hear are words like yes, no, and good job on repeat like a broken record. Now that could actually be very helpful, but imagine if you had no clue about what those words actually mean. There's no context, no clarity, just noise, and unfortunately that's the reality for most dogs. People flood them with empty praise and vague corrections, thinking they are communicating when in truth they are creating confusion. So in this video I'm going to show you why saying no to your dog and even good boy might be doing more harm than good, and more importantly how to fix it. So before we dive into how to condition a marker effectively, let's get something straight. What exactly is a marker? A marker is nothing more than a cue, so a verbal word, a visual signal, or a physical gesture that predicts something else. This means it's a bridge, a link between the dog's behavior and what comes next. Whether it's a soft yes, a sharp no, a click from a clicker, a nod of the head, or a quick leash pop, the purpose is always the same. To signal to the dog that behavior right there is leading to something. That something might be a reward or it might be a correction. But the power of a marker isn't the sound itself, it's the meaning the dog attaches to it. And that meaning is built through consistent intentional conditioning. Without that foundation, markers become meaningless noise, and they start to have no place in training. The most common mistakes that strip markers of their power come down to two things, which are inconsistency and weak consequences. First, owners often fail to condition the markers properly. They will say yes or no without ever pairing those words reliably with a meaningful outcome. Other times they start out strong but then stop delivering the promised reward or correction consistently, so the dog learns that the marker is just noise, something that doesn't lead to anything real. That's how desensitization creeps in. On top of that, even when the markers are followed by a consequence, the value of that consequence is often completely off. The reward might be too boring to matter, and the correction might be too soft to interrupt behavior or create clarity. So you end up with a dog who either ignores the marker entirely or is confused about what it means. The result, frustration on both ends of the leash and a relationship built on miscommunication. Now let's break down how to actually condition these markers effectively. So first of all, if your dog has already been desensitized from a specific sound, like you have said no 1,000 times without following with any consequence, it might be smarter to just pick a new one so we can start with no issues. Once you have chosen your new reinforcement marker, the conditioning process begins. And it starts very simple, a quiet, controlled environment with minimal distractions. The goal is to set the dog up for success, not to test him. So you give the cue, let's say for example, yes, and then immediately follow it with a reward. Not forced into the dog's mouth, but offered in a way that encourages engagement, like calling the dog to come get it. Then repeat again and again. Some dogs will catch on in 5 reps, others in 25, but through the power of classical conditioning, the dog will begin to associate the cue with the expectation of something valuable. You know it's working when you say the marker and your dog instantly disengages from whatever he was doing and heads towards you. That's the moment you have built real association. But if your marker isn't working out in the real world, if your dog ignores you in the park, around dogs, or during exciting moments, you're facing one of two problems or maybe even both. Either your conditioning wasn't solid to begin with, or the value of your reward doesn't outweigh the motivation your dog has for the distractions around him. Either way, the solution lies in rebuilding that association with intentionality and using a reward your dog genuinely cares about. The same applies when conditioning your correction marker, which is your no cue, but here the stakes are even higher. If you overuse it, throwing out no every time the dog does something that annoys you, like sniffing the ground, playing with another dog, or simply ignoring you without following it up with any consequence, especially during the early stages of conditioning, you're setting yourself up for failure. The word quickly becomes background noise. The real challenge though is that unlike a reward marker, you can't teach a correction marker in isolation. So you can't just say no and hand out a punishment in a vacuum. It has to be tied to an actual behavior that needs interruption. That means the only way to condition it properly is to set the dog up to make a real mistake on purpose. A moment where you know the behavior will happen and when you are prepared to step in with a clear, fair correction immediately after the marker, or we can just wait for the dog to make a mistake without setting him up for failure. This requires precision and timing, but most of all, it requires restraint, because if you misjudge the moment, apply too weak a consequence, or correct a behavior the dog doesn't understand as wrong, you don't build clarity, you build confusion, frustration, or even mistrust. Conditioning a no marker isn't about punishing more, it's about making sure that when you say no, it actually means something, and that it always leads to the same clear result. Without that structure, it's just noise. So to sum it all up, markers only work if they mean something, and that meaning comes from consistent intentional conditioning. Whether it's a yes or a no, the cue is worthless unless it's been backed by a consequence the dog actually cares about. If you throw around markers randomly without follow through, they become nothing, but if you take the time to condition them properly, they become powerful tools for clarity, communication, and control. This is it for today, and if you found this video helpful, consider subscribing as there's a lot more coming on this channel. I will see you in the next one.